Okay, great. Sorry, guys. I was having some technical difficulties. I hope you can all see me. Here I am. Okay, great. I can see on Instagram that people, do I need to turn it around? There we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right, I am here. I'm Courtney. I work with Stateless. Sorry about that. I was having internet troubles. So today we're going to talk about how to run a fitting. And before we go, I'm going to just reintroduce myself in case you haven't met me. I'm Courtney from Stateless. I'm a product development and production manager. Stateless is an outsourced design, development, and production team based in New York. And we work with brands both big and small across the globe. I've pinned our Makers Row link so you can find us later if you'd like. I didn't do it here. Let me just see. This is Makers Row. Okay, so you can find us. Okay, so Stateless has a partnership with Makers Row and now Embark Live. Embark Live is an online platform that connects fashion entrepreneurs with business professionals. You can find our product team on Makers Row, and you can find our branding team on Embark Live. Think of Makers Row as the platform for making product, and Embark Live is where you can find the other back end stuff, any other fashion oriented businesses and services like branding or even sales and accounting. Today, we're going to talk about how to run a fitting, and please feel free to ask questions throughout. I'll probably stop at the end of each segment to answer the questions rather than answering them as I go. Okay, what is a fitting? A fitting is a part of the development process that takes you, sorry about that, guys. I'm using Instagram Live and another platform, so I'm like boggling. Sorry about that. Okay, so a fitting is part of the development process where you take a sample freshly received from a factory, you put on a fit model, and you address fit concerns. Reviewing things like if we're referencing the t-shirt that I'm wearing, for example, armhole height, sleeve length, sleeve cap, armhole shape, maybe the neck drop, collar width, body length, etc. And the objective of the fitting is to address how your design actually fits on a body. I've said it a million times, design elements should not be addressed in the fitting, but there are a few exceptions. For example, here we'll just keep referencing my tee. I've got an embroidery piece. Now this is a little kid's shirt, so if we were fitting it on an adult, we would probably have moved this over. So let's say this is the first proto, we got this, and it doesn't have the embroidery present on it, for example. Our team might print out that embroidery artwork to scale, and then we go and we actually just move it around on the t-shirt. And then we place it. So like I said, for kids, because this is a little kid, they don't have to deal with bust projection, so they don't have to, this wouldn't look like it was going into the armhole of a child, but it does here. So that's a design element that's okay to address in a fitting. Other things like what type of button or zipper or trim, things like that, or maybe even like a stitching detail that's like like a quilting line or something like that could be addressed. But things like the sleeve type should not be changed until last. I just want to talk through it. For example, right now I have a set-in sleeve, and if we were at the proto fitting and the brand's creative director, namely you, asked, what if we made it like this kind of a sleeve? What they're asking for is a raglan sleeve. So we sketched the design to be a set-in sleeve t-shirt. If you wanted to explore raglan sleeve, rather than approving a sketch and passing it to a factory and having a factory build a pattern based off of a set-in sleeve, we should have stopped and explored in sketch format what a raglan sleeve tee would have looked like, or any other, a dolman doesn't have a sleeve seam, things like that. So you want to try to address all of that in the design process, and you only want to address small design details in the fitting, because the fitting is to address your design's fit on body. Okay, so if I were to be asked, what if we did this kind of a sleeve, a raglan sleeve in a fitting, the short answer is we can try. But now we may be able to address, the collar or other fit elements on this t-shirt, but we've kind of lost our proto fitting, because now we have to go, we're going to update the sketch, we're going to update the spec, and we're going to pass it to the factory. A lot of the pattern that they made is going to be thrown out. and they kind of have to start over. So now you're getting your first proto in the new design at second fit. And to remind you, I'm not going to talk about the process in detail because we have so many other times before, but you're going to do proto, second fit, third fit, which we call the PP, and then maybe some salesman samples. So basically what you're getting at what's supposed to be the second fit is your first proto of the raglan tee, because your original first proto was a set-in sleeve. So now we get to raglan tee sample, and let's say that there's like bagging on the shoulder. It happens a lot. So we're saying, okay, let's try a dart here. We put in the dart, and in the third fit, which is supposed to be the final fit, we see the dart, and the designer says, I don't like that. Or the creative director, says, I don't like that. So now we're at what was supposed to be the final fit sample, but we're still working through fitting this because we changed the design. Does that make sense? So if you can't envision from sketch to before getting to product, it's okay if that's part of your design process, but you're going to need to start with a lot more time in advance than most traditional fashion calendars. And you're going to need to have a lot more money in your budget because you're going to have to make 5-6 samples before you get to what you're looking for. So ideally, again, you just have your designs fleshed out first and you're getting your samples. You're really just addressing the fitting. Any questions so far? Let's see. I'm just going to double check. No. Okay. And I don't know why this won't go away. Okay. No questions. Great. So we've talked about what to do before factory pass off a lot, and we've talked about, the design process, but this slide, we're going to review an important step during the development process. So once your factory completes your sample, the tech designer or pattern maker should measure all the garments against the specs you passed the factory. At Stateless, we have a spec sheet with all the required POMs, which are the points of measure. And their required measurements. The tech designer compares the sample against the required spec and notes what each POM measures on the actual sample. Sometimes you can come in and let's say the sleeve length is a 1/2 inch shorter than what you asked for in the spec sheet. But we may find that when we see the sample on body, we actually like the sleeve length. So it's not necessarily a problem when they don't match. And sometimes it's like, if we go back to the pattern maker, they may say, well, we couldn't do that because of X, Y, and Z with regard to pattern balance. So anyway, once we've spec'd the garment, we coordinate with a fit model agency to book the fit model. Now your fit model is the same person every time, and your specs that you build before you pass to the factory has their specs built into the design. So you should not change fit models throughout the process. If you do, you have to find another model that has similar measurements. And we very much recommend that you are not the fit model yourself because you need to be able to look at the design. So now we're ready to fit, and who and what do we bring to it? You need a fit firstly, whose body measurements you use to build your initial specs off of. You need your team, which includes usually your creative director, which is you, the designer, product developer, me, and a tech designer or pattern maker You also need to have your sketches present to either update any details or say remove a pocket flap, etc. And then materials-wise, you can bring safety pins, large and medium binder clips, a measuring tape, garment tape, chalk, and or a Sharpie. You may also want some extra fabric laying around and some scissors. So that just for the sake of conversation, let's say we're fitting this tee on me. We start from the top of the garment, we go down to the bottom. Looking at the collar, I'd say that it's approved as is. We could address the height here if we wanted to, but I like it. But there's a ton of bunching in the armhole, for example. Again, this is a kid's tee, so I bought this knowing that, right? But let's address that. Fit model puts their arm out and we say, okay, we want to drop this armhole about like a 1/4 of an inch. But then what happens is if you drop the armhole, then the shape of the sleeve is going to change and it's going to have excess fabric here. Now, do you want that, or do you want to also add to the armhole opening so that it's the same shape sleeve, right? these are the kinds of things we're addressing in a fitting. Let's say that there was like this going across the shirt. That's where you either take pins or binder clips if it's like fake leather, for example, or something really thick, and you would pin this out. So that's what we do throughout the fitting. And then we take notes. So we'll say, okay, neck approved as sampled. Let's say we wanted to, this is called the neck drop. The front neck drop is actually, it's kind of low. Like we could move that up, like 1/4 inch. Back neck drop, sometimes it'll be like dragging, like way too high up, and it makes it look like your shirt is going like this. And that could be also the reason why you're getting awkward stuff here. So we would want to increase the back neck drop to make this thing fall properly, right? So the reason that you need kind of all of these people on your team is because fittings are pretty technical, and you don't know that language, assuming most people that we work with from Makers Row, you're an entrepreneur who has a business idea. You don't have necessarily the fashion background. So just like when they're like, we want sleeves like this, instead of saying, I'd like that to be a raglan sleeve, you might not know what to look for. So at Stateless, at least, we really run the fittings. We run them pretty strongly, and we just ask the clients their opinions as we're making the decisions. Something like that I was addressing with the sleeve, that's a stylistic opinion, which the creative director, the brand owner, should be in charge of. So once we get there, basically how we run the fitting at Stateless is the tech designer is doing all the pinning, doing all the chalking. I'm writing the notes. Let's say, for example, this sleeve, now we've addressed the armhole drop and the sleeve opening, and we want actually this sleeve shape. We want it to be like more rounded. There's not really a POM or point of measure in the specs for that. So we would really have to just take either a Sharpie or chalk, and we would draw that new shape, and that would communicate that to the pattern maker. Another way that you can figure out a fit is to actually cut the garment. So in this case, it's not too bad, but let's say it was really bunching up and we really couldn't envision, you could slash the garment right here to see how much you wanted to drop this open. And then that would also help you determine if you did want to make the sleeve just go to the tight part or go down. So those are the kinds of ways you can address fit issues. And again, when I remember the first time I watched a designer just chop open a garment, it like really freaked me out because it's, the client pays all this money and it's this nice fabric and what have you. So also bear in mind that your first, second, and sometimes even third fit samples be really useful in the end. So that's another reason why you don't want to just address design details in your fitting, because you're buying materials, you're paying for pattern adjustments, you're paying for sewing. So, it's pretty wasteful. You sometimes can't wear the garment again or use it for anything besides, communicating your fit. So once we're all done with that, we take a front, a side, and a back photograph. We take the fit notes, and then the tech designer takes the specs, and based on the fit comments, the pins, and everything else, we either will lay the garment down, and you can take pictures and redraw certain things over the garment. They also update the points of measure. And something I want to talk about is, let's say the factory misses something. In this development process, it's not a blame game. So when we're trying to figure out who is or why something was, we may say, like, oh, was that the factory? Was that the pattern maker? Was that X, Y, and Z? But we're not trying to hold anybody responsible and blame them. What we're trying to do is figure out what's causing it so that we can make sure if it is a spec, then did they miss it? And if they did miss it, what do they need us to do in order to communicate that that's necessary and needed in the garment? So you may put a better call out in the sketch, etc., or just in you pass the new updated specs and the fit comments to the factory, you bold and highlight that and say, hey, this was missed. Please don't forget next time. I'm going to answer questions I see coming through. The title of the team, we are Stateless. For startups on a budget, my pattern maker is doing the pattern and the sample. What is the standard in the industry? Should the fitting be priced incorporated or sample pattern price. Okay, so if you're working with a pattern maker, for the most part, there's kind of several ways that they'll work with you. They will either price a flat rate and allow you to have small revisions. Let's say if it was just this armhole and that's all we were changing, everything worked out. Some pattern makers really wouldn't even charge you for an update. But if you change the design, or you let's say that a pair of pants, like there's a back yoke, like on a diamond shape on the back of jeans, and it, your sketch originally was like pretty severe diamond, and then you changed it to be more like, a less severe angle, pattern maker is going to charge you for that. But for the most part, pattern makers, every time you pass them back fit comments, they're usually just going to charge you for another pattern. And then your sample, sometimes your pattern maker is your sample maker. Sometimes you then take it to your factory. What are your thoughts about companies offering trying patterns on a computer avatar? They claim to save time by cutting on the number of fittings. Good question. So you could do this even before. So we're using Clo. This is the avatar program that this person has brought up. It's great. The avatar program is amazing. You basically build an avatar of your fit model, and little things like I've worked with designers who are very designery, and they're like, oh, what if we do a flutter sleeve? What if we do a flounce cuff? What if we do a dolman sleeve? What if we do, and they want to see all these things. In the past, before we had Clo or these avatar programs, you could just draw them out in flats. But some people can't really envision from a flat to a three-dimensional garment. So what's really great is when you have an avatar, you can kind of spin it around. You can do things like move this around a bunch of places. Like this is way too far in, right? Like this is like, you guys can't see it on Instagram. It's like in my armpit. Again, it's because it's a kid's shirt. But you can move things around in the avatar, which does help, but you still probably have to go through 3 fit processes, like no matter what. But it will help with working out some of your design details. We think it's valuable. You can also achieve this just in a flat. And Clo is still pretty expensive, and it can be challenging. So you can still do that in sketch form. I'm looking through to see if there's other questions. Yeah, I'm glad that some people agree. It's really important to not change your design in a fitting. It's really, really important. How long do you suggest keeping fit samples? When are they no longer needed? Well, a proto is, after you pass it back to the factory, it's really you probably don't need it, especially if it's covered in, it could be muslin, it could be chalked on, it could be sliced open with safety pins all over it. There's really no point in keeping that, unless you like it for your legacy, or you want to, if you're like kind of super organized and want like proto second PP and you tag everything and you just want to track your delta, that's fine. But for the most part, most protos, especially if they're all sliced up, we just, you recycle them. Okay. Someone says, you mentioned best to have garments made in New York versus LA. For swimwear, how much lead time should I build since I'm on the West Coast if garments are made on East Coast to address fittings? I'm not sure I understand that question, because I don't remember saying that New York versus LA. In particular for swimwear, LA is very strong in swimwear. That's like the origins of the garment industry in Los Angeles. It was underwear and swim. When we build a time and action calendar, basically what you want to do is you have like 6 weeks during your design phase, and that includes getting all of your fabrics approved, designed to your garments. Then you have 6 to 8 weeks to receive your first proto, and then you should take about 2 weeks to do your fitting, turn your fit comments around, reprint out a BOM, swatch your BOM to make a cut ticket for the factory, etc. And then going back, the factory again needs about 4 to 6 weeks for the second sample. Your 2 weeks again on your end, then you take another 4 to 6 weeks for your PP samples. And if you make SMS, your salesman samples, you need to order enough material in every color during your PP phase, and then you want to give the factory at least 6 weeks minimum because they're making multiples. Hope that answers your question. If you are going back and forth from the East Coast, you want to allot 5 days shipping time as well. What are your company? Oh, I already answered that. Sorry. Yeah, so the question says, I missed that comment about being better to make in New York rather than the West Coast. I think what they were trying to say is that making swimwear, it's very strong in Los Angeles. We do have some good factories here on the East Coast as well, but there's just so many more in Los Angeles. How do you think it is best to check on samples when you cannot travel to your factory, especially for color check? Yeah, so we do a variety of product development and production at Stateless. So Makers Row, we're focused on domestic production. But if you, we do stuff by distance all the way, in Asia, Sri Lanka, etc. And it's no different. I mean, I used to live in San Francisco, and we did production in Los Angeles. With your tech packs being very clear, your BOMs being filled out correctly, your sketches being clear. Yes, if you have custom colors, you need to call out your Pantones. You need to put them into either a purchase order or something where you need to have documentation that represents every detail. And you need to be able to pass that clearly to whomever is responsible. If we're doing custom dye, we send a lab dip PO to the dye house, and we list the name of the fabric, and we list the color, the internal color name, and the Pantone name. And then, we usually make a whip chart and we put our comments in there. So working by distance is not, it's not a novelty thing or unusual in this industry. It's more common. You just have to make sure that all of your documents are really squared away, because in a fitting, circling back to the fact that we're talking about fittings here, in a fitting, even before, when I pick up the sample or receive the sample from the factory or the tech designer does, we're inspecting that to make sure that all of the details are present. And there might be something missing, and we can look back and we can say, oh, it's because the sketch didn't say lining, only the BOM said lining, something like that. I mean, we're pretty ticked and tied on our end at Stateless, but there are always places where you can usually find that there was an inconsistency in your documentation. Sometimes factories just miss details, but you always want to double check that you've provided all of the information, because again, it's not a blame game. We're all in a team and we're all working together. But if you can go back to the factory and say, hey, listen, it actually was here, then they're going to say, okay. And they're going to, make sure that it's present in the next time. And if there was a mistake, I've brought this one up before, we made a wide leg pant. Our sketch had a wide leg and our spec had asked for a wide leg, but it was done on the half. The rest of the pant came out with all of our specs done on the half. The rest of the pant came out correctly, but the leg opening was like a little tiny peg entryway. And I said, look at the sketch, look at the spec. Why are my pants like this? And the factory said, shoot. And we had to waste the fabric, and the client lost money on the fabric, but the factory fixed the pattern and resewed the sample for free. So we didn't even book the fit model yet. You were able to send that East Coast, and you're on the West Coast and you're working with a factory on the East Coast, you can send that back and you can provide the documentation that shows this was supposed to be a wide leg pant. Your pattern maker understood that everything else was done on the flat, and how come this leg hole opening, isn't done correctly. Let's see. So what other questions do we have? Let's see. How many people are in the fitting again, and what are these rules? Okay, so this is what I'm talking to you guys about. Obviously, a lot of you are small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs. Our process that we use at Stateless, we take best practices from our previous experience. So big fashion houses and, small startups too, but we've taken, there is an industry standard for the processes. And what we've been able to do is take the best practices from those and put them together. So I'm telling you something that is considered industry standard, but I'm telling you exactly how Stateless does it in particular. So you have your fit model present. You have your creative director, which is you. You have a designer who's in charge of the sketches. You have product developer. Your designer and product developer could be the same person. You have your pattern maker or tech designer. Tech designer could also be your designer. And then you have, let's see, what do we have? Any specific reasons you're working with as opposed to Browseware or Optitext? No, I think Clo just was the most attractive. We know a lot of people who use Clo, and that's all. Let's see. For the avatar idea, is it feasible to get it for a small starting brand, easy to use? What does one feed it with? That's funny. I don't think it's easy to use for a small brand. If you don't go to fashion school and intern and learn, through traditional means, there are tutorials. It's not that expensive, but there's a lot of foreknowledge that we come to with, when we are using Clo. So like knowing how to, you can make a flat pattern in Clo, you can input specs, you can do a lot of technical stuff. So if you don't have the kind of analog technical understanding, it's going to be pretty hard to figure out Clo or any of the other ones. More questions. Is manufacturing on the East Coast much more expensive than the West Coast? New York, yes. But if I were going to make a tailored jacket in Los Angeles, it would cost almost the same as making it in New York. And for the most part, I prefer the tailoring in New York for a nice tailored jacket. Sorry, let's see. Oh yeah, so somebody clarified their question. It was specifically about making swimwear in the West Coast. What is the best place to look for a designer to launch your first collection? Go on Makers Row. Yes, there are avatars for kids' clothes too. So, okay, guys, I answered all of your questions. I'm going to go back and just kind of reviewed. So anything else? So, okay, so like I said, once we fit, we take those fit comments, we put them into the tech pack. So how we do it at Stateless is, you have a spec sheet. This is common for all companies. You have a spec sheet and you have one column that has the initial spec that you built, to let your pattern maker build it, from scratch. Then you take your measurement of your proto. You take the fit comments, you compare them to the measurements on the proto, you update the specs, you pass that back to the factory with your sample. Sample has to go back. The pattern maker takes the sample, they take your fit comments, they apply it to a new pattern, so a second fit sample, and we do it all over again. We do another fitting. Ideally now we've got the placement of all these things down. Again, we're not addressing design things. And from there, you do the same process. You apply your fit comments, you put your new specs in, and you ask for a third fit sample. And your third fit sample should be as close to approvable as possible. There are small changes in fit that you can address. Like, I don't know, let's say this is dragging. You can address the shoulder slope. Like we could raise this up a little bit and it wouldn't be so draggy. That you don't even have to see that. Like you can photo shoot with a sample that looks like that. It's not going to make or break the sample. You could do sales with that, but then in production, you want to just make sure that before you do your graded specs, that all of your comments are applied and that the pattern is updated to reflect that. And so what we call those correct and proceed. We call those correct and proceed to bulk comments. So you can do some small changes still without having seen it in the sample. Let's see. Okay, great. So those are the questions we have. So I wanted to do kind of the reason why we talked about this was because we talked a lot about how to prepare for passing to the factory. And a lot of our clients, when we go into fittings, they're not quite sure how it's going to be. So we wanted to talk about it with you guys. And, I want to just end on saying that, fitting is the most important process in the whole thing. You have to have your documents correct. You have to have your sketches. You have to have design details all worked out. But if you don't at least fit one time, you should be doing what I said 1, 2, 3 times. But if you don't fit, you can have something that looks really cute. Your customer is going to buy it, and because it fits poorly, they're never going to buy from you again. Your fit is the most important thing to keep maintaining and retaining repeat customers. If you know that you're a size whatever in these pants, and even if it's high waist, low waist, the pants change, you know you're that size in that brand and they're good at maintaining that size, you're going to keep going back, right? So this is why the fit process is so important. And it seems so simple, but if you don't have somebody with you who knows how to address this like shoulder slope, like do you know that that's a measurement? Because if we make this a square, like the angle that this shoulder slope is cut at is a measurement. It's going to be hard for you to look at something. I mean, we can, again, this is a kid's shirt, so we can see that there's like bunching in the armhole. You may be able to, as soon as you put that on the fit model, you may be able to say, oh gosh, I don't like that. What is that? But how do you achieve avoiding it? Do you know? So you need professionals to help you in a fitting in order to address these things so that you have a good product to take to market. This was a little quicker than normal, but we're normally supposed to be 20 minutes long. I always go about an hour. Sorry I was a little late. My internet's shaky today. It was good to see everybody. There is one more question. Let's see. Are multiple fit sessions needed for different body types? Oof, such an important question. I'm so glad that was asked before I got off. So yes, very important. If you are making a size from extra small through, let's say for women's wear, extra small through 3X in plus size, you're going to need to use 2 fit models. You're going to need to use the straight size fit model, and you're going to need to use the plus size fit model because the body types are different. Same for children's wear. If you do baby, toddler, and grown child, that's 3 fit models. If you want to do a gender fluid brand that fits all people's body types, you're going to maybe want to take somebody who's like would fit a traditional men's size large. You might take somebody who would fit a traditional women's size small and still also take a plus size 3X. It really depends on your size range. It's not like you can just take one sample and then just do math. You have to double check that it fits different body types. And especially with plus, there's the body changes in each size range. Just think about the babies. Like infants are different than toddlers, and kids are different than infants and toddlers. So you can't just take like a baby size and make it down to infant and make it up to kids. It's going to for a kid, it's going to be, the torso is going to be super long. The collar, the neck opening is going to be way too big or too tight on the little baby. The baby's not going to be able to get its head through because babies' heads are so much bigger. Things like that. So that's a very, very good question. And that's to end on. It's really important to use real fit models because also fit models know their stuff. We have a fit model every time we put something on. He'll say certain things like it might not even look like, because this shirt, for example, it's almost like it's like it was made for me. But if it weren't bunching, but it were still uncomfortable, the fit model can say, hey, you guys, this is too high up in here, or especially on the rise, the crotch of a crotch. You can, unless it's like fully giving them a wedgie, you can't tell that's like that. So you need a fit model who knows their stuff. And if you're doing such a different size range, then a plus model also knows how to address certain things like chafing on the inner thigh is a big concern with plus size wear. So they might have an okay rise, but or maybe it's a comfortable rise. It's a little low, but because of the concern with chafing, you might actually want to raise that rise up so that the legs have more less fabric bunching in the inner thigh area, for example. These are the kinds of things that a well-experienced fit model is able to help address where your eyes can't see. So next week, I'm going to do another live. I'm actually just going to talk about the difference between knits and woven fabrics. Should be interesting. And if there's anything that I breezed over in the process, it's most likely because we talked about it at length in the past. So feel free to go on Makers Row, their Facebook. All of these are archived, and now we're going to start archiving them on Instagram as well. And thanks so much for joining, and I will see you guys soon.